Okay guys, we're going to go over real quick the pieces of the test that some of you may be struggling with, and this is going to actually be your test remake from here on out, is just finishing it on your play posit. So with that being said, the first question of the test, the one that asked you on the paper, was what is the point, which of the following formulas is used to finding the equation if you know the point and the slope? Well, that's our point-slope format. And again, we're dealing with basically two equations the entire test. The first equation is called point-slope, which we've gone over in class a bunch of times. And it is y is equal to, or it is y minus y1 equals my slope times x minus x1. Okay? And again, when we break down the exact pieces of it, your slope is here. That's my slope of the line, or my rise over run, or my change in y over change in x. Okay, here is my y coordinate. And here is my x coordinate. Okay, so that is your point-slope form. The only place you could have gotten that confused with, or the only other equation we've really harped on in this entire unit, would be what's called slope-intercept form. So slope-intercept. And in slope-intercept form, we had y equals mx plus b, where b is the y-intercept. Y-intercept, and that's basically just the point when x equals 0. It's where it crosses the y-axis, so it's the y value when x equals 0. And this, of course, is your slope. And those are the main pieces you have for that equation. So that was the first question on the test, just showing me that you had the two main equations that we worked on extensively throughout the unit. Okay? The next part of the test we looked at was simplifying using point slope. So you get an equation written in point slope form. This is in point slope form. Okay? And all you're doing is simplifying that equation out of point slope form into slope intercept form. And there was two main steps we did when we attacked those. Once you had it in point slope, all you had to do was distribute into the parentheses, and then once you did that, all you had to do was isolate the y. Okay, so let's just go through this problem exactly how I would do it if it was me using my point slope form. So I'm going to rewrite y plus 5 is equal to 4 over 5 parentheses x minus 5. That's already in point slope form, so what I'm going to do is distribute, and then I'm going to isolate. And when I say distribute, I'm talking about moving my 4/5 x into my parentheses. And when I do that, I'm left with y plus 5 is equal to 4/5 times x, which is 4 over 5x. And then 4/5 times negative 5, that's the same as saying 4 times negative 5 divided by 5. So 4 times negative 5 is negative 20, and that's over 5. If I want to clean it up a little bit more, I can, because that would be just y plus 5 is equal to 4 over 5x. Negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. Now, I've distributed and I've resimplified everything, so the last thing I need to do is just isolate my y. And to isolate it, if I'm adding 5 to it, to isolate it, I need to subtract 5. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. That's 0, so now y is all by itself, and I'm left with y equals 4 over 5x minus negative 4 minus 5 is negative 9. Okay, now I'm in slope-intercept form. That's where I want to end with when you start in point-slope form. So now if I ask something like, what's the slope? Well, my slope would be 4/5, that's my m, and my y-intercept, or my b, would be negative 9. Okay, that's what we were looking for that second one. Okay, and the third type of problem you saw in the first part of your test was it would give you a coordinate and it would tell you to put it into point slope form. Again, this is my point slope format. Y minus y1 is equal to m times x minus x1. So here, the first thing I'm going to do is just label my coordinates. This would be my x coordinate, and since it's being labeled as x sub 1 since it's the first one, and that's my y coordinate, or y sub 1. Now that I have that in place, I can go through the entire equation pretty simply. So I'm just going to plug everything in. Y minus my y1 is a negative 2, so I'm just going to write that in. And that's equal to my slope, which is negative 2 times x minus my x1, which is 2. Okay? Now before I do anything else, I'm going to clean up my work a little bit. Minus a negative is the same as a positive. So I'm just going to rewrite everything with that taken into account. Now that I'm there, I'm in point slope form, so I'm just going to follow my 2 steps from the previous problem, which is distribute, and then I'm going to isolate. So now I have y plus 2 is equal to negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 2 is a positive 4. Distribution is done, so I'm going to subtract 2 to isolate my y. Positive 2 minus 2 is 0, so now y is by itself. Okay? Negative 2x plus 4. 4 minus 2 is positive 2. And I am done with that problem. Okay? So those are the 3 types of problems you saw in the first part of your exam. So I'm going to give you guys some practice time now on your test with your play pause. So over the next 30 seconds or so, I'm going to pop up a bunch of questions for you to get some extra practice on. Okay, so the next part of the test kind of took your knowledge of the point slope form and pushed it a little bit further. So it's like, what is the slope of the line represented by this equation? Well, to do that, you need to know all the pieces of your point slope format, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay? And what we're doing here is we're looking at what each piece is. This is just, y is just a y value. This is a coordinate, your y coordinate. This is the slope of your line, and this is your x coordinate. So now that I have my equation labeled, I can think about which pieces go where. So when it asks me what is the slope, well, when I'm looking, I can rewrite underneath this y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And I can see just from looking at that at this point that my slope is going to be negative 7/4, because that's what's occupying the m position of my equation. Okay, another problem that you saw in the second part of your test is what is the equation of the line that passes through these 2 points? So now we just have 2 points. We don't have a slope, and we need to find the equation. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just label my coordinates. That'll be x1, y1, and we'll call this x2, y2. Or my first x coordinate, my first y coordinate, my second x coordinate, and my second y coordinate. Okay, and to do this or find any type of information out, I need to find the slope. And to find my slope, we always draw xy charts. So let's draw that xy chart and put in our coordinates. To get from 3 to negative 4, I'm going to subtract 7. And to get from 1 to 0, I'm going to subtract 1. So my change in my y is equal to negative 7, and I put that over my change in my x, or my rise over my run, which is negative 1. So my slope is 7. And we're going to call that m, because m is how our slope is denoted. Now that I have that in place, I'm just going to put it into my equation with all the other information I have about that line. Okay, so that 7 is going to go here. My x1, I'm going to use my x1 coordinate. And my y1, I'm going to use my y1 coordinate. And I'm going to do everything the way I've been doing it. I'm going to distribute, and then I'm going to isolate. So I'm going to distribute this in. I'm left with y minus 3 is equal to 7x x minus 7. Okay? Now that I've distributed, I'm going to isolate. Negative 3 plus 3 is 0, and I'm left with y equals 7x, and then negative 7 plus 3 is a negative 4. And now I'm at where I need to be. The last type of question that you saw on that second half of the test was talking about page 70 in your workbook. So you needed your workbook in order to solve this problem. And it was one that we went over verbatim in class together, so it should be completely filled out with your teacher's notes, which is a good thing because it made it way easier if it was. And it asked you to say, how did we know that slope was negative without having to calculate it? So when we calculated our slope, this is what we got in the workbook. But just looking at this picture, it asked you to know how you knew it was negative. Well, we knew it was negative because as my graph moves from my left to the right, my slope was going in a downward direction. So you had to be able to see that this is moving downward, and when lines move downward, it means that they are negative. Okay, that was just a knowledge of vision, applying visual knowledge to your math. So that was pretty easy to do too. Now that we've done another 3 examples, I'm going to give you guys some more time to get through some more problems in your play positive, and they're all going to be like the 3 questions we just did. Okay. We also, on page 70 in our workbook, talked about how to manipulate equations. So here we're looking for possible combinations. And all that says is a minus b equals negative 2. So you're looking for 2 sets of numbers. So like a, if a was 2, b would have to be 4 for that to be true, because 2 minus 4 is negative 2. And we asked you to look at a solution set and find one that wasn't possible. So as long as you could take whatever 2 numbers were given to you and plug your a value in, subtract the b value to get negative 2, then that was a possible solution set. So another example of one that would work would be like 3 for a and 5 for b, because 3 minus 5 equals negative 2. And your test, the example that didn't work was the one that said like a is equal to 3 and b is equal to 1, because 3 minus 1 is a positive 2. And that doesn't work. So it's just manipulating numbers. It was an easy visual question for you to go through. And if you worked through it with the class, during our class time, you would have had it completely down in your book correct as well, which was helpful. Last but not least, we looked on page 78, and it was about perimeters of rectangles, and we found from looking at our table that the slope was negative 1, and it asked you to get to a slope-intercept form equation based on a rectangle that was 9 width and the length was 16. Well, we know that this would be my x-coordinate, that would be my y-coordinate according to what was in the book. So all we were doing, and we did this in our book verbatim together, was just put it into our point-slope format to solve the problem. So in this case, we had y minus, my y1 was 16, equals my slope, which was negative 1, x minus my x1, which was 9. Now that I'm in point slope, I just distribute. And I'm left with y minus 16 is equal to negative x plus 9. Now that I'm here, all I need to do is, if I'm minusing 16 to isolate it, I need to add 16. Negative 16 plus 16 is 0, so y is by itself, and I'm left with negative x plus 25. Okay? Now I'm going to give you a few extra questions to finish off your exam and your test retake. Now that we've done these work-throughs together and you've had the opportunity to see how they were done again, I expect that you show all your work on all these problems and do your best work, and hopefully we can get done with this test retake. Thank you.